Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, Skylake S enthusiast processor Deets leaked. 840 Evo firmware finally fixed. InWin's awesome $50 case. NVIDIA and AMD drop driver updates for GTA 5 and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 311, recorded 4/16/2015. Skylake leaks and GTA 5 drivers dropped. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that brings you the most informative, most helpful, most engaging, and occasionally even the most charming news in hardware. Desktops, laptops, yes, even tablets and phones. And oh my goodness, we've got news across the entire spectrum of hardware today. And what's awesome is we got a man who knows his hardware, and I love to talk to him about processors. Josh Walrath from PCPer.com. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me again. I appreciate being here.
It is awesome to have you. If you're all wondering at home, Ryan is on his annual familial golf outing somewhere, I believe, near Hilton Head in South Carolina. And apparently the fabulous golfing establishment he's staying at has the worst bandwidth ever, or the dude just wanted to play dominoes with his family, and we respect that. Interesting story kind of popped up. Well, first of all, I should probably not be looking at the Intel SSD story when I'm trying to talk about Skylake leaks.
Skylake.
Well, at first I was calling it Skybridge.
That would be AMD.
I've come up with so many variations on Sky something for the next generation of Intel processors, but I guess this popped right up on tax day yesterday. Intel Skylake S enthusiast processor and chipset details. So somebody's leaked slides.
They have.
Are we confident in these slides, Josh?
I think they look pretty good. A couple of things pop out. Of course, this is going to be one of the next generation 14 nanometer second gen process device. It's better than Haswell and Haswell E. It's kind of the next generation. I can't remember if it's a little past Broadwell. There's so damn many code word names. It's not even funny.
It's starting to be like BMW models where there's like 3,200 numbers and none of them make sense anymore.
Yeah. It's just no logic, rhyme, or reason. But this is going to be a socket 1151. So it's not the current ones are 1150. So they've added that extra pin in there. Don't ask me what it does. They won't tell you anyway.
That's
but
the
it
NSA
is
pin.
Exactly. It's going to tell everybody where you're at and what you're doing. Not like there isn't anything in our computers that's doing that already.
Oh my goodness. Let's not even go down that particular hole.
Yeah.
I was laughing.
But anyway, go ahead.
I was laughing. It's like there's the slide at the top. It's like the platform overview. And I remember stopping and being like, 65 watts. My goodness, that's a power hungry part. And being like, dude, it's a performance desktop. Quit thinking about 4-watt mobile parts.
Yeah. Now it is interesting that the design goes from 35 watts to 65 watts for most desktop applications and, larger laptops in the 35 watt range. But if you look in there, they have one other interesting thing. It's an enthusiast quad core that runs at 95 watts. So this is more wattage than we've seen in most desktop parts from Intel, unless, of course, you count the socket 2011 Haswell E, Sandy Bridge E, Ivy Bridge E, which can go up to 150 watts depending on the model, and the Xeons, of course. So this will be, it's going to be a hotter part. I think the 4790K is an 87 watt TDP. So give or take, it's going to be probably a little bit faster. We hope either that or Intel's 14 nanometer second gen process technology just runs a little bit hotter.
Which is entirely possible. I like the chipset compatibility. The Intel 100 series chipset, 40% more high-speed I/O.
40% more. Yeah, it's the DMI connection is a lot faster. And it's something that's kind of been holding them back a little bit. If you look at the SATA what the SATA Pro. I can't remember. Again, more words.
Words are hard.
Yeah.
Well, DMI 3.0, the direct media interface. It's the link between the North Bridge and the South Bridge. And I'm talking about, is it gigaterabytes? GT/S is one I don't think I've ever run into before until I started reading on the specs on the DMI.
Transfers.
Thank you.
So it's not
per second.
Graphics people would be gigatextures, but no, it's how many transfers, I guess. It's not a terribly great way of doing it, but it's essentially megahertz with the bandwidth and like 40 gigabits per second or 4 gigabytes per second up from like version 1.0. Yeah, which was like 1 gigabyte per second. And if you had multiple SATA drives and your CPU is pulling data off of that in like a RAID 0, then it's going to be saturating that DMI bus. So it's nice to have an update there. Otherwise, it's got SATA, 6 SATA ports, more PCIe SATA support, all kinds of goodies. It is truly a next generation part, and we're going to be seeing that, I think, after Computex.
Really?
Maybe. I think, or it's going to be fairly soon.
So basically just in time for Windows Windows Technical Preview and a new badass processor to run it on.
Yeah, plus video cards that will be new as well. Yeah.
That's kind of exciting. DMI 3.0, obviously the big one. Any other big news around the processor? It seems, well, obviously the Intel 100 chipset.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't tell us a whole lot about it. There are obviously going to be other things involved with the design. I think AVX is getting an upgrade there. I'm not entirely sure what. So some new features, but nothing that's going to probably blow your hair back. But it will be faster than what we have now. But the question is, how much? We have not seen any really huge jumps in CPU technology probably for the past 6 years. I mean, it's been pretty small, steady, incremental jumps, better efficiency, a little more features. But boy, you know, AMD has had their top-end FX 8350 since 2012.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seems so long ago. Well, it's funny. It's just, I'm actually finally starting to feel like it's time to replace my Core i7-920 performance-wise, which...
yeah, that's probably one of the most long-lived processors that Intel has ever produced, and they never want to have another one of those again. Too many people had that, overclocked it, and has done perfectly fine for them for ages. I think Alan still uses one. It's sad.
Yeah. Well, my gaming machine is still one, and I'm just like, you know... I've been running a lot of video lately, and I realized that 2-core processors with 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is like the sub $400 gaming machine I'm using for Skype right now, is just not what you want to be using when you're processing a 58 gigabyte video file. What you do want to be using, and which should be compatible with the 100 chipset in the new Skylake processor. Wow, I didn't say Skybridge or Skyhook for a change. Is the Intel SSD 750 series 1.2 terabyte PCIe. And it looks like, as I click through link after link after link on this page, so the PCI Express compatibility was tested. Ken wrote this up at PCPro.com. Is this? I mean, this is kind of the is the NVMe boot support going to be kind of the big thing as part of CH100 and the other chipsets as they try to bring this thing? Mainstream is probably not the right word for the SSD 750, but
yeah, there's less hardware support needed and more BIOS type support, or rather you're using firmware, the UEFI.
Right.
It's got to be programmed in there to actually work, but unlike SATA, is like, hey, I've got a SATA 6G controller. It's only going to work, you know, with 6G and 3G. But if I've got a 3G, of course, it's you're not going to get the 6G speeds. Well, NVMe, it doesn't quite work that way. You've got the PCIe connection, and it's more in terms of software and how it accesses the data as compared to the older AHCI standard that we've had for damn near a decade now.
Yeah, it's Alan's so excited about that, the 750.
Yeah, it's a monster card. 2.6 gigabytes per second. That'll do really nice on that 58 gig video you're talking about.
It's been a while since I've thought to myself, my goodness, this machine is slow, and that pretty much did it. Now we just need that 800 gigabyte version of the 750 to be announced that doesn't exist yet. That would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Intel, Alan wants you to get on that, and so do I. While we're talking SSDs, 840 EVO firmware finally fixed is kind of the big question mark. Essentially, an update to the firmware, the Samsung Magician 46, I guess it is. And, you know, it's pretty simple. The tale of the Samsung 840 EVO is a long and winding one with many hitches along the way. It launched, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
He's becoming more dramatic in his old age.
I've been admiring that. It's very Tolkien-esque.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember, the 840 EVO had a problem in that if you had it for a while and you didn't refresh all the data all the times, it would get really slow.
Right.
And so Samsung released a fix that it kind of worked, and then things would get slow. Finally, they've got this, and it's the new Magician. It's a new firmware. Every once in a while, it'll just kind of refresh itself. So it stays in the sparkly, clean manner that you expect and snappy. And they even have a button in there that you can press, and depending on the size, it'll take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. It'll kind of refresh it right at that point. So if you're feeling a little sluggish, it's a nice little pick-me-up. You just press a button, and it's kind of like an espresso machine for SSDs.
SSD performance. Yeah, it's funny. And Alan makes a really good point. This is a 2-year-old product. And as Alan points out, Samsung stuck with it to get this fixed in a really solid way. You know, and he also points out at the tail end of the article, this is only older. Yeah, I'll just read it straight so I don't mess it up. This issue was only on older TLC Samsung SSDs. Your 850 EVO is not effective. It has a completely different flash architecture, and neither is your 840 Pro or 850 Pro because those use MLC flash, not TLC. But props to Samsung for beating on this with a stick until they really got it nailed to the floor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've got one in my machine.
I had like just picked up a 1 terabyte one when it was like, wait, the patch isn't working. Alan's like howling on the other end of the phone. It'll be fine. They're on it.
Just wait 3 months. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Gigabyte X99-SOC champion motherboard review. Maury Tyler wrote this up for PC Per. It's kind of funny when you think of a motherboard being faster than another motherboard these days.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. All the functionality is now essentially in the Northridge that is in the CPU, and so you've got some I/O stuff in the bottom, and that's essentially about it. And I mean, PCIe is just so standardized that you don't see a whole lot of difference in between an AMD implementation or an Intel implementation. Certainly, it's not exactly the same with like USB 3.0, where AMD and the third-party chipsets are a little bit slower than Intel. But Maury found some interesting performance differences in just basic memory tests and some of the other CPU tests that, even though it was not overclocked at the time, it was just faster. And obviously, Gigabyte has tuned this to within an inch of its life. And, other than that, it's black and orange. Who can beat that color combination? It's like Thermopolis. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, well, one, like, I'm an A's fan, but I'm surrounded by Giants fans, so black and orange is a big deal around here. I was just kind of excited to see a machine that wasn't either all black or black and red, because it seemed like for a while there, it was just the cavalcade of black and red motherboards. Or maybe those just ones that stuck in my mind.
MSI and Asus were, using those colors pretty much exclusively. And then you had Gigabyte, who had like green, some lime green in there. And they've totally gone off the reservation with black and orange.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's funny, the idea that just doing some high quality engineering, fairly feature complete, not all the features that we've seen in some of the $300 X99 motherboards, but quote, maintains the stability expectations we come to expect from Gigabyte, but definitely has a cut down feature set in comparison to other high priced offering. Everything you need to run, but nothing you don't. It's interesting. I'm kind of curious what the new motherboards are going to price out at, if they are going to price out in that $300, $350 range, or if they're going to push up in the $400 range at the launch of those new performance processors.
The Skylake?
Yes.
Yeah, no, those going to be very similar to the Z97 baseboards. You're going to see stuff from the $129 range up to, well, $400 for the top end. But one of the interesting things about this board is you would think that it would be a pretty top dollar product, but that's not the case. It's sub $300. I think it's like people have seen it on special for $280, which for an X99 board,
that's pretty reasonable.
Reasonable. Lots of air quotations in the marks, but yeah.
Relatively speaking, within the context of X99 motherboards, where, it's not that hard to get awfully close to $400 by the time you've got, tax and shipping in, if you're not an Amazon Prime member. But that's it's fun. That's what, I started thinking about thinking, oh no, 100 series chipset. Like, are these motherboards going to be $400? So I'm pleased to hear that there will be a range of affordable motherboard options for me. Yeah. SilverStone Argon AR05 flat pack cooler, which is not a variation on the AR platform for rifles, but it's an interesting small form factor. They've laid it down flat. It's an improvement, fairly healthy improvement into a very compact package. So if you're building a small form factor, a custom PC, you don't have a lot of Z inside of your system. It's 37 millimeters high, which is pretty small. Hard to see. Pete did the write-up, Mark Adams over there. And it's interesting because, you get so used to giant air coolers, and the fact that, these, unbelievably inexpensive air coolers are as good in many cases as water cooling systems, but, it's reasonably priced. There's only a couple. I think the Corsair 860 and the Scythe Mugen 4, which is a bizarre name even by cooler standards, in terms of the performance you get for the amount you spend. But they seemed really, really happy with it. If you're a mini ITX configuration, you've got a small case, but you don't want to give up performance. This is a pretty nifty part. In terms of, stock speeds, where did it go? It's those moments there it is. It's not the greatest, in terms of the performance and the benchmarks, at idle, it's running as low as anybody else in that like 31-degree range. When you start torquing things up, it is almost as bad as a 4770K stock processor, but it's still about 10 degrees cooler than that. So, if you need all of the cooling, you should be looking at like, Corsair H110, SwiftX H240X. Man, Corsair's making a lot of coolers these days. And they'll get you down in the 50-degree range. But if you just need something small to cool off the processor in a tiny case, it's one of the only options out there I think is probably worth considering. It's not like there's a lot of people making tiny coolers.
SilverStone is making some of those mini ITX, which are just really super thin. I mean, it's a neat looking design. It's the one that's, oddly enough, it's like a orangish red with black accents. But yeah, we're kind of starting to see people go back to smaller, more manageable configurations. It's kind of interesting to see the pendulum swing back and forth. You got these huge systems and then desktop smaller things, and then went back to huge because we had GPUs that were 350 watt TDP and CPUs that were 220 watts. And so you needed all that space and cooling. And now we're swinging back the other direction, which is kind of nice.
I'm just laughing because I have these two Dell cases I inherited from these, they're red and they look like the face of a Cylon, and I swear they're 50 pounds each, maybe 30 pounds without the power supplies. And they just amuse me to no end, so I keep them. And it's also, it's like working under the hood of it's like having a straight six underneath the hood of a 70s GMC pickup truck. There's just huge amounts of space to work inside of the thing. They do not do well on a desktop. They do not do well under a desktop unless you have a whole lot of space under your desk. Interesting news from Apple. 9to5Mac has this, plus pretty much everybody else that writes about Apple products. Quote, no Apple Watches in store until June. Errands tells staff as the April 24th date removed from website. So when you were shopping, were you shopping, Josh, for an Apple Watch? I see you as really being into the, edition version of the Apple Watch.
I don't even wear a wedding ring. I hate jewelry and things. So I mean, my wife gives me a hard time. And so, no, I'm not going to look for an Apple Watch. I
just wanted to hear you react to that. I couldn't imagine in any way that you would be shopping for an Apple Watch.
Yeah. Let me go order that up.
The pre-orders went well. They did it sort of, they had sort of the Apple Watch, experience in the Apple stores. People seem to really enjoy the chance to try that on, look at the 38, the 42 millimeter, get a feel for the bands and the options. But they've, it was kind of quietly that they removed the 24th date, because basically they were shipping the pre-orders on the 10th, started at like midnight, sometime after, 12:01 a.m., 12:01 a.m.-ish. After we recorded last week's podcast. And then the idea was they were shipping on April 24th and you would be able to buy them in the stores. And they've just said, June, before June. So apparently they got a fair number, either they're harder to build or they are selling out their capacity for production. And errands, of course, as we announced last week in the message that was sent to the Apple staff, as we announced last week, due to high global interest combined with our initial supply, we are only taking orders online right now. I'll have more updates as we get closer to in-store availability, but we expect this to continue through the month of May, which is kind of thoughtful to actually tell everybody in the rank and file and the retail store staff that we know you're going to get hammered with these questions, and just tell them before June.
Yeah. Have you played with one of those yet, or at least taken a look at it or handled it?
I've taken a look at it. I was not going to go get in line to do it on the 10th because I just wasn't going to do it. Here in the Bay Area, people get a little enthusiastic with the Apple stores, and I say that with affection, not derision. You can, if you want to stand in a long line in an Apple store, oh my goodness.
There's no better place to do it than San Francisco.
Yeah. And even in some of the more obscure Apple, it feels like there's 3,000 Apple stores within like a 30-minute drive of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's at least, I think, 6 probably within an hour drive. It's nice. It's a watch. It's Apple. The fit and finish are actually pretty fantastic. I think the case, the aluminum in the case is really interesting. I think they're calling it their 7 series or 7000 series. I should probably look that up before I'm mocked in the chat room. But it's essentially it's a proprietary aluminum formulation or blend, I'll call it for my own devious purposes. That's supposed to be super awesome for watches and maybe showing up in the next generation of iPhones.
Can it survive re-entry? That's what I want to know.
Probably not. Maybe the edition. We were talking about this. We were talking about this last week. My issue is I break screens. I haven't worn watches since I started typing for a living, because when I wore a watch and I was typing 80 words per minute, 60 hours a week, my wrist started to feel like they would fall apart. So like this wrist bothered me, so I switched the watch to this wrist, and that bothered me. Then I stopped wearing watches and started wearing pocket watches again, and my wrist didn't bother me. I'm like, okay, that seems to be a clear message about wearing watches. So, it's interesting, like it's a curious piece of hardware. It seems like it does a lot of interesting things to extend the phone. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the applications evolve, because there are some really clever people making software on iOS, and I'm not trying to diss Android, because there's some amazing software on Android, but the interface on this, they're just experimenting in some interesting ways. I'm kind of curious to see where it is in 6 months, whether it becomes that thing that people bought and then sits on their desk, next to that broken Fitbit they bought in the first round, or if it's something that becomes a critical part of how people sort of deal with technology and notifications and answering phone calls and sending text messages. The theory is really good, but it's also really frustrating that you really need the phone to go along with the watch to do most of the super interesting stuff. But it's Apple. I mean, I have to wrap my phone in this, ridiculous armor-plated case to keep me from destroying it inside of 24 hours. But when I have it out of the case, I often am holding the thing thinking of how this is really kind of amazing. I just wish they had the ruby crystal on all of the models and not just on the higher-end models. And for me, that was a decision to not buy one just yet. I want to see how the inexpensive crystals hold up, and if they don't seem to be prone to being shattered, by idiots like me, then I'll pony up the cash. I'm going to have I'm going to be part of an unboxing on the 24th, which will be fun, and I will be full of annoying information about the Apple Watch sometime around 2 in the morning on the 24th or 25th. So I don't know. It's curious. I'm kind of curious to see what the whole smartwatch
experience is about.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of really curious how fast it's going to, is it going to keep picking up speed? Is Android Wear, is there going to be some amazing Android Wear stuff later this year? I'm kind of curious to see if it picks up speed and just, raging into, will smartwatches be the present for Christmas 2015, or is it still a year or two out? Because the sales are starting to really pick up momentum. And I'm kind of curious to see if that's one of those things where there's this early adopter excitement and then it tapers off, or it's going to be early adopter excitement and then build from there as more and more normal humans.
You'd think that a big push for this something that will make or break it is going to be the battery life, because I think Ryan wears his for 6 hours and it's dead.
Yeah.
So you're running around all day at work and you don't have your charger with you, you're just done.
Yes. Wow. And that's an issue. That makes it does not seem to be, in the initial announcement, Moto 360 owners were mocking openly in chat rooms and probably face-to-face the battery life expectations for the Apple Watch compared to, say, the Moto 360 and some of the other Android devices. Yeah, I don't think anybody's really expecting a lot of awesomeness out of the battery life. I mean, it's funny because I spent the last week spending a lot of time with the Asus Transformer Book T300 Chi, which is, it's funny. It's a Core M, and I started to realize that, so this is, it's a convertible. It's got this crazy neodymium magnet steel joints. And, I realized that Core M implementations vary so much by manufacturer. For sort of everyday use, I was looking at about 5 hours of battery life out of the 300 Chi, and which would not be bad if it was 2-3 years ago. But today, when I've been carrying around a 13-inch laptop I'm typically getting 8 to 10 hours of battery life out of, I have to keep the power supply nearby, or I don't get through a full workday, which is kind of maddening. And it's also kind of maddening. The Bluetooth keyboard on the 300 Chi, it's essentially a Bluetooth keyboard. There's no battery in it. There's no I/O in it. There's a micro USB port for charging. A really nice keyboard, 1.5 millimeters of travel, some really nice feel to the keyboard, a unbelievably tiny trackpad. Colors look really, really good on the monitor. But I realized, oh, wow, so that's why they really, really made some interesting decisions on the Yoga. They got more battery life out of the Yoga. It's funny just watching how they sort of configure the Core M fanless processors across different manufacturers and the sort of wildly varying benchmark results. I will say I'm in love with the idea of a fanless laptop.
Computing and quiet. It's nice.
It's strange and it's wonderful, and I just I like it.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's funny. I also was kind of laughing because, you know, the tablet half of the Qi feels really good in hand. It gets a little warm when you're computing. It's kind of the side effect of not having a fan. You know, it gets around 90 to 100 degrees. But the keyboard, you know, it's very dense and very solid up here, and it's very hollow down at the other end. And Bluetooth on a laptop takes a little getting used to. You know, when you open up the laptop and you hit the power button, you know, and your computer springs to life, and then you start tapping, and then you have to wait a few seconds while Bluetooth wakes up and connects. I found that I had to really adapt. You know, like, it seems kind of silly, but a small trackpad and waiting for a keyboard can drive you a little bit mad until you get used to it. Performance, though, was a lot better than I expected. You know, probably very similar kind of Core i5 2 years ago-ish, which is not bad, actually, even by modern standards. But yeah, shiny screens and fingerprints, that's the other thing I'll say. PC Pur's Motorola Moto E 2015 review. Sebastian wrote this up. What did he think of it? I was really impressed by this phone. A horrible camera. Yep. No light on the camera. Horrible camera. No light on the camera. Some people really were frustrated by the screen. I didn't particularly. The resolution didn't bother me. The performance is awesome. The 4G was awesome, and I thought the processor performance was awesome. How'd Sebastian find it?
He liked it a lot. I mean, considering it's what, $149, unlocked, works around the world. It's a GSM modem, 4G here, where it's supported LTE. It's got a massive battery on it. The thing is thick. It's certainly much thicker than most other cell phones you've seen. But yeah, it's got a really nice battery. The processor is still quick. I think it is a quad core. It's what the Snapdragon 410. It's not going to give you any 64-bit or anything fun like that.
Right.
But it's going to give you enough oomph to pretty much run anything you want. It's pretty low in terms of memory. I think it's 1 gig of RAM and 8 gigs of storage, but you can of course expand the storage through micro SD. And he said that just wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
The product overall, yeah, camera stinks. You're not going to get the high density, PPI of the pixels. But overall, it was a really solid and well-designed phone that does not cost an arm and a leg. And it's getting offered, in kind of, pay-as-you-go. Some guys are having specials that are, below $100 on this particular product. So it 3 years ago, it would have been a fantastic high-end cell phone. But now it's entry level, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, no, and the fact that it's unlocked for $150, I gotta give a shout out to PC Per. The on the last page of the review, there's a collection. I don't know if Burke, if you can go to where it says Scene 1 Grado headset, which one? Tell Sebastian he has excellent taste in headsets. That's he owns a nicer pair of Grados than I do, and I just don't run into that on a regular basis. But if you click on that first link on the upper right-hand side, it's Moto E versus Moto X. And the funny thing is, compared to the iPhone cameras, the Moto E camera is pretty mediocre, but it's astonishing to look at how good the Moto E is against the Moto X. If you look at the band, there's a slider you can go back and forth, and if you pull the slider to the right, it's a leather headband. There's very nice detail in the stitching. You can kind of see the little cracks in the leather, and it's all blurred out. It's that horrible previous generation sort of camera issues with the Moto E. And it's funny if you look at the Moto X versus the Nexus 6. Neither one of them are particularly impressive because it's kind of the Moto X. It's interesting choices on which version of losing detail in the background and how they're processing that. So compared to a Moto X, the Moto E camera isn't bad. Compared to an iPhone 6, it's going to get stomped like a narc at a biker rally.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. it's a nice lens choice. It's frustrating if you like to take pictures indoors. That was one thing I found a little frustrating about the Moto E is because there's no flash on the camera. You have to really take your time and wait for people to be in the light to get a shot. Lollipop's pretty cool too. And the price is just fantastic for what you get. I had a Moto G I was carrying around for several months, and this is a really nice phone. This has almost everything that the Moto G had, except for a light on the camera.
Yeah.
So I thought this was pretty cool. ICDock RAID MB66 2U3 2S and IC Cube MB561 U3S 4S review. Alan's been going nuts on a giant pile of ICDock boxes.
Yeah, it must be nice to actually, have one job for a living and be able to do it. I'm hoping that one day I can get to that point where all I need to do is write and test and editorialize. Instead, it's
apparently we all should have joined the military or firefighters and racked our 20 and hauled.
Yeah.
So these are
they're two hard drive docks.
Right.
One's a dual and the other's a 4.
Right.
You can do, I believe, RAID 0 on the dual, but the 4 slot is JBOD if you're running it through USB. Now, if you actually use eSATA, you can have a little bit more flexibility in how you address those particular drives. I didn't read a whole lot about this, and I handed it off last night to Alan, of course. Did you go over any of it? And
some of it, I mean, it's funny. So the IC RAID gets the IC RAID picked up a gold. The IC Cube picked up a silver. There's not a whole lot going on in terms of features. It's almost as expensive as a 4-bay 3rd generation Drobo. Some people in the Amazon reviews, Alan points out, there's a bunch of negative Amazon reviews. Alan did not experience any of the issues that a lot of owners who purchased through Amazon have expressed. But the IC Cube is kind of pricey for what you get. The IC RAID looks like a kind of a more interesting box for most people. That's the dual bay box. USB 3.0 is pretty standard. I think, it's a good option for external storage. It's kind of frustrating because I've kind of been waiting. Like I thought I was going to get a Lightning dock and then Lightning Thunderbolt dock. And then Thunderbolt just seemed to die off. I think there's a lot of neat things about Thunderbolt compared to USB 3.0. But you have an eSATA option. You got USB 3.0 on the IC RAID dock because it's an interesting way to add a whole bunch of storage without having to deal with a lack of space or SATA connectors inside of your case. Although I will say that if if you have cats that climb behind your system or small children that touch cables, or if you move things around a lot, eSATA is one of the worst implemented connections I've ever seen in my life. I spent a lot of quality time several years ago with eSATA RAID for a video production unit. And if anybody sneezed too hard, it seemed like the connection would have issues because it's essentially a SATA connector with a very, as far as I'm concerned, under-engineered kind of connection for external use. But
I've been in this a long time, and I've never used eSATA. I remember when some of the motherboards came. Yeah, the motherboards came out with eSATA. I was like, oh yeah, you've got the great flexibility of having that. I've never once utilized eSATA. It's pathetic.
I don't think you're really missing anything, especially the USB 3.0 does a lot of awesome stuff. Thunderbolt, you were so close. Thunderbolt, the 1360 of the modern age. Yeah, it's funny. It's when you start, there's a central computer or local computer store has several brands you probably never heard of external RAID enclosures, and it would be really awesome to test all of them, but I think there's just no way you're going to get all of them in stock ever anywhere for testing. But it's an option. Full write-up is up at PCPro.com. New NVIDIA drivers and AMD drivers. It's Grand Theft Auto 5.
So you're playing that with your small child, right?
Oh my goodness. The only way I could think of we've been sort of using educational games and some high quality interactive games. And when I say we, I mean me, as if the children and I are united in a front to convince my wife that video games are not evil. There was once a very awkward conversation. My wife does not particularly like video games, which has a lot to do with someone she knew that played a lot of video games, who poisoned the well, as it were. But as progressive a parent as it might be in many ways, I'm still not quite ready to turn my 7-year-old loose. Such a frightening shot, by the way, Burke. It's the picture on the front. It's the screen cap on the PC Per story that keeps distracting me. When you see somebody that looks completely degenerate, with gasoline and a lighter in one hand. Yeah, I keep looking to make sure he's not going to step out of the screen and try to light me and my computer on fire. In any case, have not been playing Grand Theft Auto 5. A couple friends of mine are well into ending their current relationships by the amount of GTA 5 they're playing.
Apparently, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, all the screenshots I've seen of it are pretty fantastic. Once you get past the mayhem and the fundamentally, theft,
antisocial behavior. Yeah.
Well, it's I don't know if it's entirely antisocial. It's just not nice.
I mean, you're social, but you're criminal.
You have the option of making choices. In any case, the 350.12 Wickel and then AMD released a 15.4 beta. Both of those are all very Grand Theft Auto 5 centric, which hit it. The wee small hours of the morning on April 14th.
Improved performance and support, multi-GPU essentially are the big fixes there.
Yeah. One of the things that Scott pointed out is, Scott Michaud wrote this one up. He, quote, ran the game for about a half hour on Windows 10, build 10049 with a GeForce GTX 670. Since these drivers are not for the pre-release operating system, I tried running it on 349.90 to see how it performed before upgrading. Surprisingly, it seems to be okay, apart from a tree that was flickering in and out of existence during a cutscene. I would definitely update my drivers if they were available and supported, but I'm glad it seems to be playable even on Windows 10. So if you are running GTA 5 and you have an NVIDIA card, update your drivers. And if you have an AMD card and you're feeling adventuresome, update your drivers. I have not really ever had any issues. That's me knocking on wood with AMD beta graphics drivers. But of course, beta means not finished. So if your face explodes when you install them, it's on you.
It's kind of like, what was it, the latest Assassin's Creed with the people without the faces? They just had like the teeth and the eyes, and that's what it reminds me when you said when your face explodes. That's it right there.
Nothing left but teeth and eyes.
Yep.
Boy, a bunch of people cover this story. The one I linked to is on The Verge. Microsoft will bundle its apps on Cyanogen's Android OS. I've thought this was just kind of a cruel story. Not The Verge being cruel or anybody else, but CyanogenMod, if you're not familiar with it, is what allows you to say, it's an operating. Basically, if you've seen a pure Android experience, say on a Nexus phone or a Moto X or G or E, and then you look at your Samsung phone and you're like, a lot of these features in my Samsung phone are driving me nuts. I'd like a pure Android experience. Cyanogen makes it really easy to do that, or comparatively easy. So now Microsoft is bundling applications. I'll quote, Cyanogen says it's partnering with Microsoft to integrate the software giant's consumer apps and services into the Cyanogen OS. Bing, Skype, OneDrive, OneNote, Outlook, and Microsoft Office will all be bundled later this year. As part of the partnership, Microsoft has committed to creating, quote, native integrations, unquote, on Cyanogen OS. It's a partnership aimed at Google's version of Android. And, given the amount of people that live well, certainly not in Bing, but in Microsoft Office. I think this is a very, very smart move for Microsoft, and maybe not an overt acknowledgement that they are not gaining a lot of ground on the Windows Phone OS. Or Windows 10 phone, maybe, if you want to look forward a little bit. But I just thought it was so funny that this version of this operating system we're all going to get away from all of the crufted up stuff. We'll have will now be available on this relatively pure version of Android. Samsung is apparently bundling some Microsoft apps and services with the S6. Dell is apparently planning to bundle Office and other Microsoft apps on its Android devices. Obviously, this is a large-scale push by Microsoft, but I will be curious to see, one, how the Cyanogen community reacts to this, and two, whether or not you can manage to, remove all of this from Cyanogen, should you not be particularly enthusiastic about the Microsoft lifestyle.
Yeah, certainly OneDrive and SharePoint are going to be big for this, especially if you've got a tablet that runs this. You're probably going to want to be able to get to those shares. So Microsoft had no choice. They want to make money on these products, but they don't have a platform that's mobile that they can do it on. So what's your other option?
It's just used by 2% of the smartphone universe, give or take, on which chart you're looking at. No, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see, when the Microsoft bundling with the iOS occurs.
Stranger things have happened.
Like the Google certification program for cardboard clones. I had to include this. It was just so odd. Google announced a certification program for cardboard clones. So if you haven't seen it, Google Cardboard is the way to turn your your Samsung smartphone into into a virtual headset. And the TechCrunch says Google is now taking the lid off of a new certification program that will unify the disparate headsets under a single badge, quote, works with Google Cardboard. So you follow a few guidelines, you give Google a look at your headset. TechCrunch writes, Google will certify a manufacturer's headset design will work with all cardboard software. Which is smart. Kyle Russell will vote this up for TechCrunch. The link to the guidelines is highly amusing. When we said cardboard is for everyone, we meant everyone, writes Google, and that includes the manufacturers too. So the cardboard viewer specification is open source and ready for you to start building. And if you get the manufacturer's kit, you get templates for producing cardboard with whatever equipment you have, whether that's a die cutter, a laser cutter, or just a pair of scissors. Including a viewer profile generator so you can punch the holes in the right spot. I just thought that was so funny as an open source standard. But it does make it really cheap to do a VR experience. It's certainly not as fantastic as some of the more expensive headsets. Dotacase, Knock Labs are called out in the TechCrunch story. And I got to admit, I got a chance. There was a company that must remain nameless was here. I'm in the Hack 5 warehouse, and they attached this crazy 360-degree camera to a drone, and Darren's flying the drone around, and I'm sitting here, with a smartphone strapped to my face and this large headset, and I'm having a really amazing virtual experience. Of the room I'm standing inside of, I'm just, attached to the bottom of a drone, and it's cool. I've been watching VR fail for closing in on 20 years now, and it's kind of exciting. The idea.
Nintendo VR boy in the 80s.
Yeah, so close. They were so close.
Yeah, it seemed like it certainly gained a lot of momentum when guys like John Carmack. I'm not saying that he revolutionized it, but he gained the industry. Well, he gave it a lot more weight.
Yeah.
And certainly, once Facebook bought into it as well, you can see where they're going to, because I mean, we've all read William Gibson and Snow Crash and all these other. I think didn't Tad Williams have. Anyway, so you know, you're these virtualized worlds that you will interact with other people just like you're there, and that's why Facebook got in. It takes social networking to yet another level, and this is just, it's kind of nice to have an inexpensive way to experience this in a, you know, a more basic manner, but at least get you used to it.
And if you want pure confirmation of the street finding its own use for things, to quote another science fiction author, William Gibson, do a search for VR stuff on Reddit. Just watch out for the NSFW stuff. Virtual Nookie may not be coming until Facebook makes it happen, but boy, there's some naughty stuff going on inside of Oculus.
You remember
Rift
Brainstorm, don't you?
Vaguely.
It's Christopher Walken, Natalie Wood's last thing about, you know, being able to have true virtual memories. Yeah, it reminds me of the naughty part. Bad news.
Memory palaces. I will say the Crescent Bay demo at CES 2015 on the Oculus Rift was the first time I was really like, okay, I want to play with this.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. this VR thing is finally happening, people. Inwin Affordable 503. This is a really nice case for $50. I was reading this and thinking, okay, low price point. This is a, you know, I'll say it. I'm over Windows in cases. I don't need them anymore. I don't particularly desire them. I think I want to go to something that looks like a piece of, you know, 1970s stereo equipment. Maybe a little soft glow coming from behind the grill. But this is kind of crazy for $50. The front of this case is made from glass.
Yeah, it's tempered glass.
Yeah, Sebastian wrote this up for PC Per. You know, it's really cool. Toolless drive bays, decent amount of space inside the case, black and red or white and black color schemes. It's a really good looking case.
Yeah, it's not overly plasticized. Cheap. It's not gaudy in the least. I mean, you look at other $50 cases, it's either kind of a steel box or it's all, you know, vacuum formed plastic that has swirls and
it looks like an anime
colors.
Fan brain exploded.
Yeah, terrific. But yeah, it's a solid case for $50, and you get a lot of value out of it. And yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah, tempered glass front cover, I should point out. You know, should you have small children who run in the house when they shouldn't. And it slides down to expose the 5 1/4-inch drive bay. I love that the power buttons and the USB and headphone jacks are on the front of the case and not covered by the cover. I'm sorry, I'm getting over my irritation by a case. I finally ripped this front door that closed over the case but covered all of the power buttons and jacks, which I thought was profoundly stupid.
Because what's the point in actually closing the cover when you've got stuff attached?
Exactly. I also got to give props to Inwin for they did these layovers in Photoshop on the webpage, on the inwin-style.com webpage. And there's one in there that has spacious inner space. And I was like, that's odd. And then I realized they're pointing out that you can actually fit a full-size GPU inside of this thing. You know, 170 millimeter heatsink space and up to 408 millimeter GPUs. So 7 expansion slots. It's just, I can't believe how nice this case is. We haven't been inside one yet, but one of my pet peeves in inexpensive cases is oftentimes there's a very poorly finished edge. You know, the number of times I've reached into a cheap case and ended up with, you know, yet another interesting scar on the back of my hands or on the side of my wrist. You know, this is clean and smart, and I'm liking the layout. And it looks like there's actually decent space for cable management too. Yep. So
yeah, fit and finish is fantastic for something at that. I mean, Corsair kind of did some wonders with some of their, you know, $50 and $60 cases, but this is kind of taking that to yet another level.
Oh my goodness, I should not have opened io9.com. I will say, though, on the front page, though, there's a whole breakdown of the new Star Wars trailer that I'm going to close now because the Millennium Falcon is doing stuff, and I am constitutionally incapable of not looking at the Millennium Falcon unless you put a picture of Jar Jar Binks near it. Just a horrible character that I'm still angry about.
You and
Oh,
everybody
my
else.
goodness. The Wind-Up Girl. That was the one I was trying to remember. Have you read that one?
No.
I cannot pronounce the name of the author. Paolo Bacigalupi, but it's really interesting. It's kind of like steampunk, except it's more biological in nature, and it's an absolutely fantastic world that just explores, technology moving in what for me was a completely different direction from anything I'd ever kind of thought of. I don't want to do any spoil. I'm not even gonna. The primary energy storage device in this particular world is just strange and wonderful and awesome, and it's a really interesting read. But yeah, it was one of the things I stumbled across in the well curated sci-fi section of my local bookstore.
Very nice. I actually just bought a Kindle, one of the Paperwhites. I
It's
used
a nice
to
piece of
love,
hardware.
Yeah, I used to love to read all the time, and then children, 2 jobs, pets, wife, all these things got in the way with actually reading. But in the past 6 months, I've started to get into it, and now that I've been exposed to a bunch of new short stories and that from kind of the Hugo controversy, I've really gotten back into it and interested, and so I got a Kindle so I can download some of these things and take a look easily.
How did you like that? I mean, the Kindle's come so far since the original version. What was your experience and did you enjoy reading on the?
I haven't gotten it yet. It's coming in tomorrow.
But
I
keep me posted.
Ryan had one of the originals, and he had brought that to CES. And I had the buttons on the bottom, and it was very limited in what you could do, but the screen was really interesting. Now they've got all touch enabled, and it's got the better backlit and faster processor and more memory. So I'm going to be really curious to see how I like that as compared to just having a standard old 6-inch book.
Right. It's interesting. My wife carried one for a very long time. She started using her phone again, and it's when she first started carrying one, she started getting feeds from a bunch of her favorite blogs, getting fed directly into the Kindle. I got to say the screens have gotten so much better in the last few years, and for me, the backlight was just an amazing experience. As ridiculous as that sounds as a book light.
No. My wife likes to go to sleep before I do. And so I either have to read downstairs or I can just stay in bed. And I'm looking forward to having that Kindle Paperwhite and just not bugging her with overhead lights.
You are really going to like this. You are really going to like that. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Those are down to $79 for the basic Kindle.
Yep. I got mine on special for $20 off, so it was $99 rather than $119.
That's pretty awesome. Watch yourself with your credit card on that.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's also a really amazing way to get back into classics because all that Gutenberg stuff that's been formatted is available. You can dig around inside there and get it downloaded on there. So if you find yourself with a staggering need to read like all of Shakespeare, you're good to go.
You have it.
It could happen.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I'm also a misguided literature major, so who knows how I ended up here. Dude, anything coming up on PC Per you can tell us about? Anything that's got you excited to watch coming up in the next few weeks?
Boy, I'm trying to think. I've got like a video card review I'm trying to get up. I'm trying to get these things out. As you had, talked to our good friend Sebastian. Some of the Grado SR 225Es.
That's a nice. I have a pair of those.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah, I can't say enough about them. I've got some Logitech headphones that I'm also doing. Brian, we're starting to get to the point where I think things are going to start getting busy. I think there's a small AMD APU refresh that's going to be coming out soon. new chipsets and motherboards. They'll be coming out. Not much in graphics, at least from AMD that I've heard of. I think that's going to be closer to Computex, not Comdex.
I'm with you.
Aging myself. So I think it's going to be a lot of little things and some interesting things, and I think storage is going to just keep motoring along as Intel starts releasing more of their 3D NAND. Samsung will obviously, counterattack with greater and denser versions of their technology.
Right.
But nothing that's catching my eye within the next couple of weeks, other than just some nice reviews.
Nice reviews. I like that. Bob.
Nice.
When we wrap up here, I'll be posting the latest version of Tech Thing, where I get a little more in depth on that Transformer Book T300 Chi, and the whole tablet experience was. It's been a while since not tablet, I should say, convertible 2-in-1 experience. Shannon has the laser Pet Cube. I don't know if you saw the Pet Cube at, now I'm going to call it Comdex at CES this year, which is essentially a remote camera and speaker home monitoring system with a built-in laser pointer, so you can check on your pets and torture them remotely.
Oh, nice.
Interact with them remotely. And it's kind of been interesting. Are you currently running Chrome or Firefox?
Chrome, because I've got 16 gigs of memory.
And you want to use it all. I
want to use it all, baby.
Oh my goodness, it's been interesting. I started using Firefox again lately, and I kind of did our speed round was talking about reasons you might want to dump Chrome for Firefox. I've actually been really impressed and how good that is. And also,
Firefox kind of went off the cliff there for a while, and that's when, Google swooped in with Chrome, and everything was fast and efficient. All the basics, but really fast. And now they've just bloatwared it, and Firefox again. That whole pendulum swinging thing. It's wonderful living in a society where mistakes won't instantly kill you, but you can actually improve yourself. Unlike the Dothraki.
By the way, have you gotten HP? Or do you have cable or?
I've got cable. Yeah.
I haven't had cable for years and years. So I'd walked away from Game of Thrones because I just couldn't deal going through that whole experience. Well, I mean, that whole experience with certain characters over again. And it's been really funny for me, watching as the series diverges from the television series kind of diverges and changes from the novels. But HBO Now has been fantastic. We've had a couple glitches on it, but it held up pretty solid. That was kind of my big curious test for HBO Now, was whether or not it was going to puke all over its own lap when they released Game of Thrones on Sunday night. But Major League Baseball, their advanced media division, engineered that system for HBO, and it held up pretty well, actually.
Nice.
But yeah, if you were cable cutting, and you would like to have access to the HBO shows, that is a relatively affordable way to do it. I also had a lot of fun. I wrote an article for Tested column on how I turned a Raspberry Pi 2 into an audiophile music streamer, which involved the painful lesson of realizing that you actually have to unless you find a distro that's already been recompiled, the Linux kernel been recompiled for the Raspberry Pi 2, all that Raspberry Pi 1 stuff will not run on the Raspberry Pi 2.
It's a slightly different ISA. Yeah.
Well, I was sitting there, and I was, I wasted the better part of 4 or 6 hours trying different stuff before the light bulb went on above my head, and I was like, wait a minute. And then I was, dealing with the horror of like, okay, do I, recompile the kernel on the Raspberry Pi and wait 3 or 4 weeks, or do I do it on a desktop and then transfer it? And then I found a really cool piece of software, called Volumio, which, if you like music and have a Raspberry Pi, is worth checking out, along with a piece of software called Rune Audio. And actually, I was surprised at how many sort of dedicated audio operating system distros there were on the Raspberry Pi platform. That was kind of a pleasant surprise for me. So,
yeah, a friend of mine actually just he built one of these and did the Volumio, and he got everything on FLAC that he could, and yeah, that's his deal. It's his high definition audio media player is just this Raspberry Pi in this little box.
if you want to get started, if you want to start flinging yourself down a slippery slope, while you have those headphones, if you want to really start having fun with those headphones, track down an AudioQuest Dragonfly. Version 1.2 is out now, so it's like $150. The 1.0 version, I think you can still find it if you look around for $100. That is an amazing piece of kit for $150. It's a digital analog converter, I want to say based on a Sabre DAC, although I'm not sure anybody really knows what DAC is inside of there, and a super excellent headphone amp. It's just a really clean piece of engineering, and it will make really good audio sound amazing for the money. So,
Nice.
yeah, I was laughing because I realized at one point I had one, if I count the Focusrite, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 DACs, and my original Slim Devices MP3 player, all within arm's reach, which is a little unhinged even for me. So
Yeah, but do you have any tube audio?
I started to go down the tube audio abyss, and then Lloyd Case went on a rant one day, or what passes for a rant out of Lloyd Case, because he's a sophisticated, dignified human being that is actually one of the most pleasurable human beings I've ever gotten to work with. But boy, does that man hate tube audio with a fiery passion. And he's an engineer, and a pretty good one. And he just sort of elucidated the reasons he thought that was a profound MacGuffin in terms of audio. My next door neighbor, who is an engineer for a major airline that does aircraft stuff, has the most insane collection of tube amps and vintage radios I've ever seen. He's got like 3 sets of Klipschorn. Well, he's got a full set of Klipschorn. He's got one Klipschorn, then a pair of Klipschorn speakers, and then some of the smaller, like he's got like a set of La Scalas, a full set of Klipschorns, a single Klipschorn he uses in another room. And have you ever seen a Klipschorn speaker in real life?
Yeah.
So, if you're in the audience, you know what I'm talking about. The thing's about 4.5 feet wide. It's designed to go into a corner. I want to say it's the better part of 3.5 feet deep, weighs 200-300 pounds, like 101, 102 dBs efficient. It's a pretty amazing musical experience, but it's a commitment. What Lloyd Case would call the spousal acceptance factor is non-existent in most households, because it's like somebody cut a piano in half and stuffed it in the corner of your room. But the sound is amazing. But yeah, it's going on. I go over to his house to satisfy my tube urges, and then I scurry back to the random collection of solid state amps that I have. I've got some NODs and a set of NADs that I use to buy-wire my B&W 601s. And I'm going down the audio rat hole, and I should probably stop that.
You're halfway there, if not.
I'm gone, man.
Yeah.
Let me wrap this before I completely put the audience to sleep and they start begging, perhaps to have Ryan and Josh on, not talking about audio to excessive lengths. This is it for this this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. If you've never heard the podcast before and you want to hear more, that's awesome. Go to twit.tv/twitch. Email us twitch@twit.tv. Where do people find you on the Twitters, Mr. Walrath?
You can find me at Josh D. Walrath, WALRATH. You can find me there, and sometimes I talk about things and weather in Wyoming.
And the internet, on the internet. I see your naming is as creative as at Patrick Norton and at Ryan Schrout.
Yes. It's easy for people to find me, unfortunately. Just
they got
ask those collections people.
Oh goodness!
Mm-hmm.
the funniest thing about my Moto E testing is it came with a preloaded SIM card, which apparently had a phone number that had recently been recycled because I got several text messages and phone calls from an angry pawnbroker and a bank.
Yeah. Whoever had my cell phone number before me was in big, big trouble because I got, for about 10 or 11 months, it was a daily call from multiple people.
That's just sounds profoundly
There's
unpleasant.
a reason why he gave up his cell phone number.
The debt doesn't go away. They just can't find you. And they actually can find you if they're pissed off enough. And on that bright and cheerful note, I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Josh Walrath.
We'll talk to you next time on Twitch.